Hello, and welcome to the Mind and Money Podcast. I'm Sherry, a financial coach.
And I'm Val, a financial planner. Today, we're talking about building and creating the structure for an ADHD-friendly budget. So the first step in building this structure is to take a look at where you're coming from. So look back at the last 1 to 3 months and record what you've been spending money on or where your money's been going. We have to understand what our patterns have been and where our money commitments are when we want to build a budget. Because just pulling numbers and giving estimates, as Sherry and I have both seen with clients, really doesn't work well when you're wanting to create something that's going to work for you.
And if you feel overwhelmed by looking back at the last 1 to 3 months of transactions on your bank and credit card statements, it's okay to pivot that a little bit and actually look forward starting from today and track where your money does go on a day-to-day basis for 4 to 6 weeks to just get a really good idea of what your numbers are. Often tracking where your money is going is better from a mental standpoint because it can take less mental capacity to spend a few minutes at the end of every day or 5 to 10 minutes at the end of every week to see where your money has been going versus combing through months of statements and transactions.
Yeah, and I think with that can come less emotions that are maybe negative that then have us veer off and not want to do it. Because when we're going back, we might be harder on ourselves versus when we're in the present moment and moving forward. And just like Sherry said, whether it's daily or weekly, I have clients that do both. They look at their numbers daily, but some of them do it weekly just to have those check-in points. Monthly is tough because when you're going back a whole month, I know sometimes I can't remember what I did last week. So when you're going back an entire month, there's also no changes that you can make to go back in time to travel and spend less or spend in a different way. So by going either daily or weekly, you're able to kind of have that check-in point, that temperature check is what I call it.
I like that. And yeah, even tracking without having a full budget and a full plan of where you want your money to go starts to have you thinking differently about your spending. So if even if you're feeling overwhelmed with budgeting in general and you're not ready to put the time together to build a plan, just have that check-in regularly with where your money has been going, where you spent that day, and that small step and those few minutes already will start to transform you making your spending decisions based on that time you're spending and the awareness and how you feel about those different transactions that you're either writing down or entering in a spreadsheet to be able to see, like, does this align with me and what I want my life to look like?
Yeah, and it's bringing awareness to your numbers, bringing awareness to where numbers truly go. I have clients that will say, oh, I spend this much on groceries. And I say, okay, for the next month, let's track that and see, because it's often typically a larger number than what we think it's going to be. And however it works, I have clients that use pen and paper, they use a money journal. I have clients that use Excel. I have a couple clients that have an app that they like to use. So it's really what's user-friendly for you. I personally love a good Excel that's easy to use and simple to input, and then using that as your tracking device to keep track of where your dollars are going.
Yeah. So then once you have these numbers and once you get an idea of where your money goes month to month and what your overall plan is going to look like, the key is really making sure that the plan has you spending less than you make. I saw a really alarming statistic. Now take it with a grain of salt because it was through social media and American based, but that Americans, there are only 40% of Americans are actually spending less than they make. And it's pretty alarming. So we don't want that to be you. We want you to be spending less than you make. But to do that, you have to have a clear idea of what's coming in and what's going out. And groceries is a big one where you're probably spending more than you think if you haven't been tracking. I just looked yesterday because we're coming to the end of a month, and just my husband and I, no special eating requirements or anything. We've been spending about $650 a month on groceries for just two adults who don't eat anything fancy. So costs have gone up. And even before that, you were probably spending more than you thought on groceries. So yeah, being able to see where your money's going, helps you pivot where you want it to go. And many banks nowadays have apps that can track your spending for you and can save you a lot of work if you're predominantly spending from that bank account or with a credit card and a bank account that are both attached to the same app.
Sherry and I are both variable income humans. We own our own businesses, and that means that we're working off of an income that isn't set by our boss and paid out or by a company. It is on us. So having a system when you are that entrepreneur, business owner, sole proprietor is so important and has brought so much clarity to my numbers. Pre having a system, it was whatever commissions came in, maybe some went aside for taxes, but the rest was going towards paying bills, paying off the credit card. There was no system in place. It was what came in was used and then kind of hoping for the best at tax time. And then I met Sherry. And even as that financial planner, we had a plan for our dollars, but in the sense of a business owner, I needed more structure that made sense and helped my mind work with variable income, right? Having a really great pay and then maybe a quieter month and then the roller coaster. So working with Sherry was huge in creating that system that made sense to my brain. The way that we set it up is the money goes into one account. It's called business income. And then I divide it into sub accounts. So right now my sub accounts look like business expenses, my salary. So I pay myself a salary biweekly, which is fantastic. My admin salary, and then, oh yes, taxes, of course. We must have that one. So it's based off of percentages. I've kind of tweaked some of those percentages. And before I had an admin, I had a bonus account that I would create a bonus for myself. But the investment made way more sense at this point to have my admin. But what do you have to offer to that, Sherry? Because you were the one that helped me with this structure for my business.
Oh, so let's talk about how to get that bonus account back. Having a system when you are a business owner so that you are not spending emotionally when you have those higher commission or income months. Like money in your bank account, if you don't have a plan for it, it's just going to be gone. And then the next month, if you have a lower income month, you're going to be in trouble. So we will dedicate an episode to exactly how to do this, how to set it up. But having that variable income, if you're a business owner, it's important to have a system in place. And if you have a variable income as an employee because you are working hourly or sometimes are working overtime and sometimes not, what I encourage you to do is when you're building your budget is to build your budget based on spending less than you make with the lower end of your normal paychecks. What does that look like? And how can we make sure that that's funding all of the essentials? And then those pays where there's a little bit extra because of overtime or a bonus or whatever that looks like, then that can be designated for more of the non-essential, like fun things and savings account. So being able to have a plan based on whatever your variable income looks like is really important so that you just don't give up on your budget when you have a lower income month and toss it all out and just go back to winging it. We don't want that for you.
It helps around the scarcity mindset. I know when you get a big commission, you might really feel like you need to hoard it. So when you've got a system in place and you trust that process and you keep doing the good work, the system works for you. The system works with you. It's huge.
I love when an entrepreneur starts to implement these things and start to see like, oh, I have enough in my account to pay me for 2 months, 3 months. And then that's a key indicator that it's time to increase what you're paying yourself. And how that leads into the personal side is really transformational too, when you're able to give yourself a salary bump from your business. And when it comes to setting up your budget, what is really helpful on the personal side is having separation based on the purpose of the money. The account setup that I love to encourage people to do when they're starting out with budgeting is to have multiple accounts, 2 accounts for spending, and then different accounts depending on the needs of your budget for saving. So the 2 different accounts for spending are an account for your bills and your fixed expenses. So your mortgage, your rent, your utilities, your phone bill, the things that are consistent as far as timing of the month. And then a second account for spending for the things that are not consistent, like groceries, gas, restaurants, entertainment, Amazon.
Your living expenses.
All of those things that can be all over the place. You can spend no money in this category some days, and then other days you can be going to the grocery store, getting gas, grabbing other essentials for your home. So having that separation helps you make different spending decisions because you're able to make decisions specifically around that spending account based on the account balance. And if you manage money together with a spouse or partner, I encourage one more spending account, or actually two more spending accounts, and that is one for each of you for personal spending. So this can look like $20 a pay, $100 a pay, whatever works in your budget. But this is money that's set aside that goes to each person that is no questions asked spending. You can spend your money based on whatever works for you. What you spend it on doesn't matter. If you hoard it all up and then buy something big or buy lots of smaller purchases, it doesn't matter because it's part of the plan and it's not impacting your overall household finances.
And as Sherry said there, you can have as many savings accounts as you want. I am a human that loves multiple savings accounts. I use Simply, they're fee-free. Their interest rate isn't fantastic, but I'm not holding large amounts for long periods of time. So it really depends on the client that we're working with and how they want it to look. So I've had clients that are totally separate. I've had clients that are totally combined. I've had Venn diagrams, and it really depends on how they want their structure to look. But yes, when it comes to having that bills account and then having that spend account, that's brought a lot of peace of mind. And then savings, it really depends on, again, I recently with a couple clients have pivoted to having a fund and a safety savings. So one is for whether that be gifts or travel, and then the safety savings is for emergency savings. That structure varies depending on the human you are. Because someone could look at my banking and be really overwhelmed because I've got 18 accounts. But for me, I love it, but that's not for everyone. So we create the structure based on what feels best for you and how you want to see your money organized. And it's really about giving your dollars a job.
It really is. Like, it is about giving your money a job. And for me personally, having one savings account for all of the things would make me feel overwhelmed and would be challenging for me when I needed to take money out, even for something that falls within the realm of that savings account. But feels different when I'm taking money for car maintenance out of a car maintenance fund to pay off a car repair bill. Because this is exactly what it's for. This is expense aligns with this account versus it all being mixed together. And yeah, Val and I both lean towards, let's add another account as a solution to a financial challenge that comes up. And it can feel overwhelming for many, but I love how visual it is. I can log into the bank that has these accounts and I can see I have this much for vacation. I have this much for car maintenance. I have this much for new technology. So that separation really is beneficial to me personally to be able to make different spending decisions.
Yes. And that works for our brains. It doesn't maybe work for everyone's brain, but it's even drawing it out on a piece of blank paper and seeing how many accounts would you want to have and what would you want them to be for? Because you might not want as many as we do, and that's okay. And I actually recently, about 6 months ago, I called Simply and I condensed some of the accounts. So I put car and home maintenance together instead of having car and home separately. So just to shorten my list, maybe I don't have 18, but I've simplified because for me, I was like, okay, this also just needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but I still have more savings accounts than I'm sure the average person does. And when we're looking at creating structure and, really taking that first step and looking at our numbers, it's important to see, and I mean, I always say we're kind of like a little science experiment. So looking at what hasn't worked for us in the past or what derailed us, what made us maybe feel defeated to the point where we're like, well, this isn't even worth it. Like I'm just going to give up on this budget. And a lot of the times it comes from setting a budget and creating numbers kind of from like, I think it's this, and then trying to live with that and then not being able to live within that. And then you're like, well, forget it then. But that's why we do that homework first of looking at where our numbers are going. So we're using factual data in our science experiment.
And so many people that I connect with, they've tried this, they've tried that, they've tried this, they Google how to budget, and so many results come up that they try one and it doesn't work for them and then they give up. And that does often happen when a large expense comes up. So it's challenging when you're first starting to budget and you include like vet savings in your plan, and then that vet savings account doesn't have a whole lot of money in it, and then there's this emergency, and like those things, like this hasn't caught up to the emergency, so you sometimes feel defeated, and maybe that's pulling out the credit card or taking money from another savings account, and it can be more juggling initially, but stay the course and really lean into, how does my brain work? Does it need to see things separately versus all together and maybe with a file for tracking? Or what's going to work for you? Take time to try it for 2 to 3 months. And then if it's not working, just change it up, because there are a million different ways to manage your money, build your budget. And what I see a lot of times too is that people give up on budgeting because their plan doesn't include fun things they enjoy.
Oh, yes.
They create a plan that's all about restriction, and they cut everything back so they can put more towards paying off debt or savings. And they haven't found that balance between what do I need to put towards life now and what needs to help future me. And too much restriction can often mean that it's not something you can stay with long term.
It leads to that rebellion. It's like restricting what you eat and then just going wild because you've just put yourself into this, like, cut everything out, but you have to save space for joy, for fun things, for
chocolate.
I have clients that love the movies. So as a family, that's something that they want to have room in their spending for, to save space, to have joy in the now. Because if we're just working towards the future, then the time passes us by and life is for living. And we want this to just give us boundaries to our living and alleviate the stress because our finances are handled.
With ADHD, we like to impulse spend things.
Yeah, we do.
A lot. And there's lots of recommendations out there, and I love them, around like wait for 24 hours or wait for longer if it's a higher purchase. But another great way to put boundaries around that impulse spending is to have a dedicated impulse spending account. So if you manage money with a spouse or partner, maybe that is your account that is your personal spending account. If you are managing your money on your own, maybe you have a separate account that's just called impulse spending, that's linked to a card you can use online. And that puts boundaries around your spending, but doesn't cut it off altogether, and allows you to spend without that guilt and shame, which is really important.
Yeah, you've got to think of yourself as like needing that output, whether it's like however you want to think about it. But let's think of like a toddler that really wants to color. Well, if we're not given boundaries, we're going to color all over the walls and we're going to spend all of our money. But if we have boundaries and we have a piece of paper, then we can use that. That's my analogy for the day.
We could offer analogies for everything.
Yes.
Just make sure you subscribe so you hear them all. And to finish up, I just want to share one thing that has really been huge in helping my brain figure out how to work with money. And I love this, and it's hard to do this, but I have been able to pivot from getting dopamine from spending to getting dopamine from saving. And when I transfer money to a savings account, when I put money into my investments, like that lights me up. I check way too much. I check my investments way too much. It's not the best thing. I do not recommend. But being able to see things grow and have that balance between spending and getting excited when money goes into my savings account. And when I see that interest added to the money in my savings account, it just compounds the dopamine that I get from saving.
For me, it's been on the business side, having a plan for when that income hits my account. So having that percentage breakdown and switching it up as needed. And on the personal side, it's been having a weekly money date where I sit down, I look over the last 7 days, I put it into the categories that work for me. If I bought something that needed to come from a savings account, let's say it was car maintenance, then I transfer that money back into my main account from that savings account. So having that kind of like, I don't know, you could equate it to your weekly house reset or your house cleaning. Doing that financial reset and putting things in place, that's been huge. And maybe half an hour, and that's really being extreme. That's with distractions in there, as we love to have. max. So it really focused. It'd probably take me 10 minutes, but
And
I love making it longer.
And like, again, we're money nerds. We lean towards tracking more
Yes.
detail than you really need to. So I'm the same. Once a week, I sit down and I pay off all of our credit cards
Yep.
so that everything's tracked. I love when it happens that I get that credit card down to zero, but it doesn't always happen with penny transactions. But that time spent, probably if I didn't go into so much detail, it would probably be 10 minutes without all that tracking and extra level of things that I want to see detail of. So
yeah, I think that when people think about getting started with their finances, they think it's going to take hours and it's going to be stressful and they don't have the time for it, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I encourage my clients that when they have their money date, like go to a coffee shop that you like, get a latte, like infuse it with joy, whether that's having Netflix on in the background, which for me, like, way too distracting, but like make it a ritual, not a chore.
ooh, I love that. Or go to the pub with your spouse or partner.
Yeah.
It's a place you enjoy. Yeah, being able to do things that make it an easy, enjoyable habit and figuring out ways to get that dopamine from saving or paying down debt. And there's so many different ways to manage your system. And when you're first getting it set up, the first 2 or 3 months, there are going to be the most roadblocks and hurdles. So I just encourage you to stay the course and don't give up on the plan, because the plan may need tweaking, but it doesn't need giving up on. So we are glad that you've been here listening to the Mind and Money podcast, talking all about budgeting today, and we can't wait to see you next time. So be sure to subscribe so you get notified when we drop that next episode. Have a great day.